VHS covers of the 20th century are something of a lost art form. Back in the day, when you were visiting a local blockbuster or if you were in a shop, unless you had an encyclopedic knowledge of cinema, the only things you'd really have to go off in order to find out if a film was any good was word of mouth or the blurb on the back of the box. Well, that and how awesome the cover looked. Some covers looked amazing, others not so much. But one of the most important things to bear in mind about video covers is that they were designed with the specific intention of parting you with your cash. So naturally, while they couldn't out and out missell you a film, they could rather bend the rules a little bit. That's one of the problems I encountered with today's film, 1986's If Looks Could Kill. This was another tape I pulled out of a mass haul, and based purely on the blurb and the cover art, I was convinced I was getting myself into a slasher thriller type movie. Maybe something even a little bit Jarlo inspired. This proved not to be the case. The cover itself seems to largely use imagery that occurs in the last 20 minutes or so of the film. A film that has a total runtime of almost 90 minutes. That guy with the machete, he's in the film for a good chunk of the runtime, but he doesn't do anything with a machete, not till the last 10 minutes of the movie, and his character overall is in no way machete crazy guy driven. The woman on the bed? Well, that scene doesn't happen until about 25 minutes off the end of the film, and again it's terrifically misleading. The police? 5 minutes from the end of the film. The creepy guy looming in the background? He's our main protagonist, and what on this cover looked to me to be a telescope is in fact supposed to be a video camera. So what's this terrifically misleading film all about? Well, the film follows cameraman come undercover snooper George Ringer, played by two-time only actor Tim Gale, a videographer for weddings and parties who, after a particularly long day's shooting on a barge, is picked up by a man named Jack Devenoff for a special job. Jack wants George to secretly film a woman's apartment who's suspected of being guilty of fraud. George is at first hesitant, but decides that, well, a job's a job, and accepts the offer. From there, there's a lot, and I mean a lot, of nudity, softcore sex, and sitting around doing sod all. But after about 40 to 50 minutes, there's a sudden, totally expected plot twist when the woman in the apartment that George is filming winds up dead. This then takes another equally expected turn when George's employers disappear and the footage that George has shot is manipulated to make it look like he was the one who killed the woman in the apartment. From there, the film sinks into another 10 to 20 minutes of George driving around town trying to look inconspicuous while trying to track down Jack to get some answers, and this then leads to the closing 10 to 20 minutes of the film where it all goes to hell and Jack reveals his real motives in a showdown that was almost as underwhelming as the rest of the movie. There's a special kind of disappointment that reveals itself when you put a lot of hope into an idea of a film based purely on its cover and a plot breakdown, only for you to then find out that neither are what you thought they would be. But this wasn't uncommon back in the day, and even today there are companies trying to present shit as shinola, if you'll pardon the expression. The plot's frankly forgettable. There was 90-ish minutes of my time that I gave to this movie, and frankly, if I could have asked for a refund, I would have. It's slow, plodding, predictable, and sleazy. It's almost irredeemable. It just reeks of cheapness. From the opening title card to the fact that this film has absolutely no trailers or logos preceding it, it really is just a rotten affair. The film was directed by Chuck Vincent, who, from the looks of things, pretty much spent the majority of his career producing and directing softcore porn, sexploitation, and awful exploitation pictures. Most of these haven't seen a re-release, with good reason, and have fallen into relative obscurity. I'm not talking enjoyably bad pictures here either. I'm talking truly, truly bland features. Vincent sadly passed away in 1991 at the age of 51, but I'm sure if he was still with us today, he'd still be churning out mediocrity. This was also written by Craig Horrell, a man who worked very closely with Chuck Vincent in producing most of the films that are on Chuck's credit list. So again, nothing of interest is really here to report either. Coincidentally, he also died in 1991, and I cannot stress just how awful the script for this movie is. It fails on almost every level in my opinion. The pacing is all over the place, with long, drawn-out segments being speared by random 10-minute bursts of plot development and moments that require a very large suspension of disbelief. It's very messy. There was one moment in this film that I thought was actually pretty impressive, where we see our lead break into the woman's apartment to bug it, only to nearly get caught, only for it then to be revealed that we were watching those events back from a recording that was taken from the video camera across the street. That was quite a nice pullback and reveal, but even that left me asking, well, why? It's not like it adds anything to the narrative. As it stands, it's just a moment where the film can go, ah, but it has absolutely no reason to do it. The dialogue doesn't improve matters, with poorly crafted lines that don't sound even remotely natural or believable, and the ending was just so rushed and tonally out of place. I really did wonder whether the writer had just got bored and thought it'd be more interesting to make an action movie instead. The direction's bland, there's nothing beautiful about this film, it's mechanical filmmaking at its absolute worst. And when the best thing that I can say about it is that it's at least somewhat sort of okay sometimes in places, something's gone drastically wrong. Equally on the Cine front, I have to be honest and say that this is just a flat and very grey film to look at. There was a real opportunity to make this film a bit more colourful, to explore and experiment with shot types. After all, this is a suspense-driven thriller. It's the kind of thing depth of field shots and tight close-ups for action were invented for. And yet this film prefers to shoot about 80% of its footage from a distance or in the backseat of cars. It's just so lifeless as a film. I'm not saying it's totally tonally bereft of life. There are one or two shots where I was able to sort of sit there and go, well, okay, this isn't terrible, but otherwise it's just such a boring film to look at. I will, however, give this film one minor brownie point to its credit. There are a couple of gore-driven sequences towards the end of the film that were relatively well handled and didn't feel completely awful. It's in no way enough to save this film in any capacity, but it's bits like that that kept me from absolutely trashing this movie. I think one of the biggest problems that this film has is that it's trying to be two things at once. A suspense thriller and softcore porn. The problem is that those two genres are directly contrasting against each other, really. You need to be invested in a suspense thriller, you need to be able to focus, to keep track of what's going on, and most importantly of all, your thriller needs to actually be interesting and have a point. Shoving softcore porn into the equation, and as mentioned, there is a lot of titillation in here, completely screws with the audience's attention span, because boobies. And because of this, it just completely distracts from what's actually happening as part of the main plot. I'm not saying that you can't do an erotic suspenseful thriller, but films like that are very carefully crafted to ensure that the eroticism doesn't overshadow the plot elements. But here it feels like a thriller with porn stapled to it. And as a result, an already precarious script just descends into a dark and grubby little feature. Only adding to this frustrating mess of a film, the soundtrack is cheap and tinny. It fills the role of stock action soundtrack a little too comfortably, and it's as generic as it comes, really. There's no standout sections, and it's quite far from masterpiece material. It does the job. Again, it's all very mechanical and by the numbers. If Looks Could Kill was released in the UK on VHS in 1987, originally distributed by Platinum Pictures, over here it was distributed by Nova Video, and since then it's never been seen or re-released again. And with good reason. The picture quality is a little poor, especially in the darker portions of this film. It's more than tolerable to watch, but I reckon it could probably be cleaned up. That being said, the terms polished and turd spring to mind, so it may be a little while before you see this one getting an 8K restoration. What we have here is a film that was most likely purchased due to a cover that, while not entirely misleading, was certainly inappropriate for what this movie's contents were. They say you should never judge a book by its cover, and after watching this movie I am inclined to agree. One or two okay-ish gore shots and some nudity does not a good movie make, and this film desperately needs some serious revisions to even make it tolerable. This film's less steamy thriller and more sleazy filler, and one that I hope I can avoid for as long as possible. It's a hard pass from me.